Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Raise the Bar in Real Estate. I'm so excited and just anticipating this great conversation with Matthew Lowrance. Matthew is from Environmental Works. And unless you're probably in a crisis situation with mitigating radon or dealing with a sewer or maybe contaminated soil or a oil tank, you might not need their services. But what I want to do today is really put this on your radar as something to be aware of. And if you come across these issues, we're going to be candidly talking about how to address them and what to look out for. So really excited to introduce Matthew. He has a very in-depth background in environmental science, came up from Texas and went to Portland State, started his business with his partner, Joel, and have really been moving up the ranks in Portland as one of the top environmental conscientious companies in Oregon. So I think you're going to get some great insight. Welcome, Matt. I'm so excited you're here.
For
Uh,
having me.
yeah, it's definitely been exciting to have this opportunity to talk to you today, and I think there's going to be a lot of valuable information people are going to glean from it. So, first of all, tell me how you got into this field of environmental science.
Yes. Um, I went to college right after high school, I guess because I thought I needed to, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until really I kind of honed in on, oh, I can get a college degree on nature and the outdoors because I really loved rivers and mountains and plants and bugs and nature. And that led me down the path of starting to pursue an education in Texas and then coming up here in environmental sciences. And so moved up here in the late 90s, went to Portland State University for graduate school, and that's where I met my business partner, Joel. But uh, how we started Environmental Works is me and Joel both got out of college, and I'd grown up in a smaller community, kind of farming community, and Joel had done construction. And when we got out, the reality of what environmental consultants do wasn't really what we thought it was. We spent a lot of time in a cubicle working on spreadsheets and numbers in laboratories, and that isn't really, I didn't really put those two together during the whole time. And so we thought that we would find a way to integrate what we loved and were passionate about, which is just the environment, with something that was a little bit more hands-on and helping people.
And did you start environmental works in college and graduate school or right afterwards?
Afterwards, I went and worked for the DQ, and then also worked for another consulting firm for a couple of years. Joel went and worked in construction because he couldn't find a job in the environmental sciences field that could support his family. It's really low. It's hard to get in with those jobs entry level, making a living wage, and so we had this idea, and so that's where it started.
And what year was that?
This is our 16th, almost 17th year in business.
Oh,
So
wow,
yeah, so it's
congratulations.
been a good ride.
So, for those who aren't familiar with environmental works, I know as a realtor, you're very well known in our world, but for our listeners, tell us like what you guys do and what's your scope of services that you offer.
Yeah, we offer a pretty broad scope of services that are kind of, it seems like all of them a little bit, well, not all of them, but a lot of them kind of niche, I
Mhm.
guess, in a sense. But so we work with realtors and home buyers and sellers, most of the time initially doing in real estate, doing inspections for radon inspections, for sewer scopes, for looking for underground storage tanks on the residential side. On the commercial side, we also do environmental due diligence, so phase one environmental site assessments for commercial realtors and buyers, all the way to sampling and then remediation and cleanup. But we also have a whole suite of plumbing services and excavation services. So we have directional drilling, pipelining services, septic pump trucks, and pumping. So a lot of different stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So tell me a little bit, how do you help homeowners like protect their biggest investment of their life? It sounds like, do you come in when the issue usually is identified, or is any other preventative steps somebody could rely on your services for?
Well, I think that most people come to us when they're either buying the property or the issues we find in the inspection are then presented to the homeowner that they need, because most people unfortunately are not doing a lot of preventative maintenance. I would guess I'll use sewers as an example, right? Like, I mean, a lot of people will abuse their sewer lines, right? Like, and put grease down them and flush things down the toilet that they shouldn't. And so a lot of times they don't call us until there's an emergency. So yeah, I think but then in regards to just protecting their investment, oftentimes what I think is, a lot of these inspections that we do for home buyers, I really wish that the homeowner previously could have reaped the benefits of these. And one of those specifically is radon.
Yeah.
I ask a lot of realtors all the time, like, how many of y'all have tested your house for radon? And I'm surprised every day that at least half of them in the room haven't. And I'm like, well, when you sell your house, someone's going to, because
Hmm.
that's the norm now. And so why not be getting the benefits for your own human health while you're living in that home instead of doing it later?
Very good point. And now I'm gonna have my husband. Very good point. Yeah, I was just mentioning to you, I'm kind of going through this radon issue at a property I have under contract, and it's really opened my eyes to, yeah, how potentially hazardous this could be. Explain radon. Why is it a environmentally hazardous gas?
Yeah, well, it's the second leading cause of lung cancer. It's the leading cause of lung cancer for non-smokers,
Uh-huh.
and it's you can't see it, you can't taste it, you can't smell it. The only way to know if it's there is to test for it. And where it comes from is the underlying geology. And we happen to be prone in this area to an underlying geology that has rocks in it
Uh-huh.
that have uranium in it. And uranium is where radon comes from. And that rock got here from the Missoula floods. I don't know, a lot of people maybe have heard about the Missoula floods, but it
Yeah,
was at
yeah.
the end of the last ice age. And when things started warming up, this big ice dam broke and it flooded out of southern Canada, up in northern Montana. And those flooding is what caused the Columbia River Gorge to form. Imagine the amount of water that had to come through to
Wow.
scour
Mm-hmm.
that. But when it did that, it took all this granite rock, which is not from around here, and granite rock has uranium in it, and it deposited it all over the Willamette Valley in places. And so that is why then we have this underlying geology that has it, and it gets trapped inside the house, and we breathe it over long periods of time, and it causes a long-term chronic health risk for cancer.
Wow. I don't think I've ever heard that explanation. Thank you for that. This is why I love doing these interviews. I personally get educated and get so much out of it. So I you can definitely see your science background coming through.
Well, I enjoy knowing about it. It definitely ties together both the built world, right? Houses,
Yeah,
buildings, also with geology and science. So very interesting to me.
very fascinating. Very fascinating. Wow. Um, so let me also ask you about going back to sewer lines. It's obviously not a cocktail party conversation always, but it could be a homeowner's worst nightmare. What should buyers and owners really understand about the condition of their sewer line, and what are some preventative steps that they could take?
Well, I think it's important for buyers to know that, the possible issues that could arise when they're looking to buy a house from a sewer um, not being up to code, right? Not being up to inspection standards. And those could be from a party line, which being tied to a neighbor's house next door, which makes you vulnerable to your sewer backing up because of, the next door neighbor's teenage kids flushing a bunch of stuff down the toilet, and now the next thing you know, your basement's flooded full of sewage, and it turns into a huge remodel and all this other stuff because it's such a big backup. So it's important to do these inspections as a buyer. As a homeowner, I think that most people, it's these backups, these catastrophic backups, why most people, it's not going to happen to most people. It still happens every day, all the time.
Mhm.
Otherwise, there wouldn't be companies like us and lots of others that have drain cleaning equipment that are running around all over town cleaning people's drains because their sewer's backed up and backs up into their basement. And
Mhm.
all these restoration companies that are going around and fixing these problems for people doing it. And so uh, it's a very preventable thing to not happen, right? And so just periodically making sure and maybe doing an inspection of your sewer, or if you even see the slightest sign of backups or slow drains or floor drains in your basement draining slow, you don't want to avoid looking into those because they can turn into really big ticket items.
Yeah. Sorry. Um, Matt, so one other thing, going back to sewer, like I get really confused about is where does the homeowner's responsibility start and stop, and then where does the city take over? Like, can you kind of explain that connection between your kind of
Yeah.
private responsibility and what it's connecting to into the main sewer line?
Well, I think the short answer to that is you should be a little confused. And that's because every jurisdiction is different.
Uh-huh.
So, right, like in the city of Portland, the homeowner is responsible to the curb, right? In other places, you're responsible all the way to the main. So, I mean, it just depends, or vice versa. It just depends on the jurisdiction that you're in as to where the city's responsibility is. So,
Okay.
the best thing is just to call and ask us, and if we do an inspection, we'll make sure and point that out. But every city of Gresham, city of Portland, Vancouver, they all have different requirements and responsibilities.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Uh,
So
yeah.
that's why that is why it's very confusing, and I can't say that I know off the top of my head every single jurisdiction's requirements. So yeah,
Okay, good. I'm glad I'm yeah, wasn't there's a reason for why I'm unclear about that. So something we have in Oregon, which is pretty common, especially on the east side and sometimes on the west side, is these underground storage tanks. We were just talking about this new jurisdiction that's coming out and some of the challenges with yeah, oil tanks right now and as a heat
yeah,
source. Can you talk to that? Because it's I think it's pretty new information.
yeah, it is. We've been doing underground storage tank work, which encompasses both gas stations, but also how it applies more to homeowners is heating oil tanks, right? Like I know that anymore these aren't getting put in and used as much, except maybe if you're in a rural community and most people are moving to electric. But there's a lot of old ones around all over the place.
Hmm.
Um, and we've been decommissioning and doing cleanups on these for the last 16 years. But just recently, back in 2008, the EPA said, well, this stuff that's in heating oil is also diesel, it's the same thing,
Hmm.
that there's ingredients in it that now we are classifying as carcinogenic. Okay, and those are something called benzene and naphthalene. And I want you to think if you've ever smelled mothballs, that's what you're
Hmm.
smelling.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Naphthalene. Okay, that's why you don't smell them much anymore or see them because they're carcinogenic. But but they classified it as carcinogenic back in 2008, but from 2008 until recently, they did these human health studies. Human health studies take a long time to do, right? I
Hmm.
mean, in this case, right? A really long time, right? Almost, I mean, we're talking 16, 18 years since they updated these guidelines. Well, they have these new human health studies that are out showing that, man, this stuff's actually a lot worse than we thought it was.
Oh my.
And so the EPA changed what our exposure levels to these chemicals can be. And the DEQ now adopted those. And how people get exposed to that is when your tank leaks, it puts this diesel fuel in the soil under your house. And then these vapors from that soil get into your house. They get into your house the same way that radon gets into your house, which
Mm-hmm.
is the stack effect. I don't know how geeky we want to get on that,
Geek out,
but
yeah.
I'll talk about it. This is how we don't talk about and this is the health effects of the things that we're looking at when we're doing a home inspection for people, right? And is in Oregon, particularly, people are very vulnerable to indoor air quality. Okay, and that can be radon, or that can be exposure to these chemicals that are in heating oil that have contaminated your soil that get brought into your house. Well, how do they get brought into your house? They get brought into your house by something called the stack effect, and that is uh, today's not our normal day in Oregon, right? I mean, it is when we're in the summer, but most of the time around here, we've got weather outside that's like 50 degrees, 45 degrees, and you're heating your house inside up to 70 degrees. And so that temperature differential creates a pressure differential. So
Mm-hmm.
think about when you open your door in the summertime and your house is cold and it's hot outside. What happens? That cold air rushes in
Yeah.
or rushes outside.
Yeah.
Okay, right? When you open your door in the wintertime, what happens with that cold air? It rushes in.
Mm-hmm.
So cold air is high pressure, warm air is low pressure, and everything wants to move from high pressure to low pressure. So our houses act like this big vacuum on the ground. And the weather here makes it susceptible to that being that way all the time. They don't have radon problems the same way in Florida and Texas because it's hot and everybody's air conditioning their house and their houses are always pushing air out. Our houses are always pushing air in, sucking air in. So we suck the radon gas in, and we suck these fumes from the leaking heating oil tanks into our house. And both these things cause long-term carcinogenic risk for people.
Wow. Wow. We were talking a bit about radon and how there's this misperception of what the right levels are. Can you just speak to that as well?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, what everybody tends to use, the EPA has always said that that number is something called 4 picocuries per liter,
Mhm.
and that's the allowable level, and that's the unit of measurement that we measure radon in. And they say if you've got above 4, they recommend mitigation. But they also acknowledge that half of all cancer deaths from radon happen beneath 4.
Ooh.
So the World Health Organization, right, which is who kind of oversees radon guidelines for the rest of the world, really, says that you should really recommend mitigation at 2.7 and above. And so we think, I mean, we just want people to be informed that we really think that the 2.7 is the better number, right? So anytime we're going to do a mitigation, we're going to guarantee it to 2.7. We don't even say anything about it, right? But I think a lot of times realtors specifically have kind of got this 4 number in their head, that have been doing it for a really long time. And so I just think it's important that people realize that there's still a significant risk between 2.7 and 4.
Yeah, that's when you were speaking to that earlier before we started recording. I'm literally shocked about that. But you also were positive, say it can be mitigated. Like,
Yeah, all these things can be. I mean, radon. We can. I mean, there's always a solution,
hmm
right? So you might as well test your home. You don't need to wait till you're selling your home, right? Test it, and then and generally it's pretty affordable. Most of
yeah.
these systems cost between like $1,700 and $2,500 for a radon mitigation system. They last basically forever. I mean, the
Mhm.
fan might go out after 10 years, and replacing it's $250, $300 to replace the fan. So it's a pretty minimal investment to make sure that you and your family are safe.
And how much is the test to do that inspection?
Yeah, right now we're charging $99 for them, so
Wow, wow.
they're cheap. And we always tell realtors as well that if you haven't tested your home, we'll test your home for free,
Oh,
your primary residence. So yeah,
I'm gonna take you up on that.
okay.
And I think, there's this perception that radon only affects houses with basements, but that's not the case. It can affect all types of houses, correct?
It can.
Yeah.
What we always say is the only way you know is to test.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so a lot of times you'll see there's these maps out for radon that says this area has a higher potential for radon versus this area. But that doesn't mean that you're not the unlucky one that happens to be living in a house in the area that does have a lower potential, but yours radon still gets, I mean, we'll test houses that are in areas that aren't supposed to have high radon, and we'll run into houses that'll have 30 picocuries, right? So the only way to know is to test. But in regards to, you do have a higher propensity to have radon in your home with older homes and ones with basements, right? And a lot of times, if we test a home, for example, that has crawl space construction,
Mm.
those are easy to mitigate without even having to do a mitigation system. Just increasing ventilation in the crawl space and maybe spending that money on insulation, so that you don't mind it being colder in your crawl space.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Well, those are good strategies. I think it's like also just hearing you talk just kind of helps just say there's always a solution. It's not a totally cost prohibitive. And for the long-term health benefits, it definitely is worth it.
it is worth it for sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have our house tested.
Okay.
Um, so just the last question. Well, I have two more questions, but one work and one about you personally. Any advice you would give to every homeowner or buyer listening right now?
Well, to homeowners, my advice would be, I know that most people aren't thinking about, well, one is to test your home for radon. There's no reason not to. Most likely, when you go to sell your house, someone is going to test it, like I spoke to earlier. So you might as well test it, and if it's there, you might as well reap the benefits of doing it. And in regards to these things that are human health concerns, the same with heating oil tanks. I hear people say all the time, "Oh, I know I've got this heating oil tank that's been down there forever, for 20 years." Well, you might have been being exposed to stuff for 20 years there, and you don't want to, right? I mean, so I would address these things head on and just get them taken care of if your budget allows for you to. And in regards to advice for buyers, I know there's a lot of inspections to do when you're buying a house, and it's a very stressful time.
Hmm.
And most people really lean on their realtor to guide them on what they need to do and don't do. But make sure that you do tank scans on properties to make sure and alleviate that there's not a heating oil tank there. Make sure and do those on older homes. Make sure and perform those sewer scopes, because you don't want to overlook that and overlook a party line or something along those lines. So,
I appreciate that.
yeah.
Great advice. So, last question. If what advice would you give your younger self knowing what you know now? And it doesn't have to be in the environmental field,
Yeah.
just words of wisdom.
Well, I mean, being that, I am a science person, so my brain's a little analytical. I have the propensity to overthink. And I think the advice that knowing now where I'm at is don't be afraid to make mistakes. I think I thought too much about things and were afraid to make moves and do things. And so if I had it to go back again, I wouldn't be afraid to try more things and be willing to make more mistakes.
I love that. I love that. Well, we're so lucky to have you and Joel in this community. You guys are doing such a great job for Portland, and we appreciate that. And
Well, thanks for having me, and
yeah,
I appreciate you informing buyers and homeowners and people in the real estate world about some of these critical issues.
perfect. I am so excited to share it with everybody. And how can somebody get a hold of you if they want to reach out?
Yeah, so you can call or text us at 503-719-6715, or you can find us online at eworksnw.com.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Matt. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.